Okay, folks, one more minute and we'll get started. If you've got your video turned on, if I could ask you to turn it off. You all look beautiful, but we don't need to see you tonight. And it'll just make life easier for everybody else, less confusion on the screen. Many thanks. Okay then, folks, it is past, so we'll make a start. So Karen, if you could unmute and hop on the video or the screen share, whichever you want to do. So thank you very much to everybody for joining. We have 47 people on the webinar at the moment, with a maximum number of 55 books. So we're doing very well tonight. It was a very popular webinar, and thank you all for joining. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we kick off. You will see probably at the bottom of your screen a button that says participants. If you hit that button, you will see everybody who's listed in the webinar, but you'll also see some icons at the bottom. One of those icons is to raise your hand. Now, we will have several question slots throughout the presentation, and if you would like to ask a question, there's one of two ways of doing it. You can either raise your hand, and then I'll come to you, or you can enter your question in the chat box, which is also one of those icons at the bottom of the screen. So either way works, and we will get to you. But as I say, we'll have some very set times throughout the webinar that you can ask questions. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Karen Robinson. Karen is from Missing People, and she's the head of projects and partnerships. And not only that, she's a non-exec trustee of Lowland Rescue as well. And most recently was up there at the People's Postcode Lottery, accepting a cheque for £1 million for Missing People and Lowland Rescue to develop training dogs and a number of initiatives around that. So first of all, congratulations, Karen, for the incredible work to help us get to that position. And
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed the gala evening as well. It looked like it was a lot of fun. So I'll hand over now to Karen.
Thank you very much. And just on that, from the moment we made this application to Postcode Lottery, throughout the bidding process and at the gala, everybody just has so many questions about the amazing work that you and that we do at Lowland Rescue. They're so interested in what you do, going out late at night, looking for people, bringing people home to their families to where it's warm, and they just love Lowland Rescue as an organisation. So I'm really proud that one of the first things I've been able to do when joining the board is to bring Lowland Rescue into the Postcode Lottery family, because it is quite a lot like a family. They're really passionate about the work of charities like ours. They love animals. So this was a hit from the beginning, because if you haven't seen yet, it's the Search Dog Heroes project. I won't spend too much time on it, because you've been sent information that you can look through. Take a look through that and watch this space for more information. So I will start by sharing my screen. Just bear with for a moment. There we go. I've never done this before, so who knows what's going to happen tonight. There we go. Hopefully you can all see my presentation. I'm sure if you can't, Chris will pop up and tell me that I've done something wrong.
I can see it, so everybody else should be seeing it as well. Thank you.
Excellent. So yeah, I feel in very safe hands this evening. Thank you, Chris, for helping me get this set up. As I said, I haven't ever done a webinar before, but this is a brilliant system. You might notice me fidgeting around. Apologies for that. That's just to keep myself comfortable. Got a bit of a bad back this week. So about me and about what we're going to do this evening. I know that there are definitely going to be people tuning in who I've met before. I've worked with Lowland Rescue for about 7 years now. from my role at Missing People, and more recently joined the board. So hello to anybody that I know, and hello and welcome to anybody who I haven't met yet. I'm sure I will meet you at conferences and AGMs and various things over the coming years. So a little bit about me. I have worked with people who are vulnerable for all of my working life. And I've particularly worked with people who are missing for about the last 10 years. So that includes adults and children. And prior to working for Missing People, I worked in policing, in the prison service, homelessness, mental health, first aid, lots of things that are relevant to the things we're going to discuss tonight, and very relevant to you in terms of the people who you are out looking for and the people who might arrive to talk to you who are missing the person that you're looking for. And I've done an input like this before, and I'll just run you through what we're going to cover today. We're going to look first at families and what is a family going through when their person is missing and how that changes over time. And then we're going to apply that to some tools and techniques that you can use if you find yourself in the really tough position of having the family or a friend or somebody who's worried about that person arriving at the scene of your search. Then we're going to move on to what is it that the missing person is going through, and I'm going to focus on adults because I know that that's the majority of the people who you're out searching for. And then how techniques and tools that you can use if you find the person and you're talking to them and they're distressed, things that you can do to factor in the things that they might be going through. So that's what I'll be covering this evening. And so if it's okay with you, I'll make a start. So first of all, some of you will have heard about this before, but thinking about families, when somebody is missing, Pauline Boss, who is a brilliant psychologist, if you're interested in the psychology of what families are going through, look up Pauline Boss. You can see a reference there, some of the dates on which she's published things. This quote here is really the crux of what's happening when a family is missing someone, and why missing is such a painful, traumatic experience for a family, because there is no psychological moving on from it. So that's what that statement means, because the person is not there, but it's very, very different to grief. And what Pauline Boss says is that when somebody dies, we are psychologically set up to process that grief. We understand it. It's normal. We know what it is. It's horrendous. It's hideous, not to minimize it, but it is something that we are psychologically set up and emotionally set up to be able to process and understand. And we go through a grief process. And if any of you have worked around the topic of bereavement or grief, you'll know that there is a staged process that we tend to go through when we're bereaved. When somebody is missing, we cannot psychologically process our grief in the same way because we don't know what the end point is. So by definition, because we don't know what's happened to the person that we love, we are held in limbo. We live in limbo, in this position where we are constantly going around and around in our heads. What has happened? Are they alive? Aren't they alive? And so that holds us in an emotionally traumatic state, which Pauline Boss describes as ambiguous loss. And what we need to consider as professionals working with those families is that we are in that state as well. So when you get that call, so you've volunteered your time because you want to help your community, or whatever your motivations are for wanting to do the things that you do, you go through that phase as well. You are held in that limbo too, and you're part of the solution. You're part of the team of people who's trying to find the person, but sometimes you don't find them, of course, and even if you do, whatever happens when you show up at that search, you don't know what's going to come next. And so that can place you in an even harder position when you're confronted with that family, because actually you don't know what the outcome's going to be either. And so for all of us who are working with people who are missing and their families, we all need to bear in mind that we're carrying this stuff too. So if you haven't already considered how you debrief as a team, how you debrief people after a search, I would strongly urge you to look into what your process is for looking after one another, looking after your team after a search, whether the person is found or not. So the second part of this quote, and again, this is Pauline Boss, is really relevant to the conversations I've had with you over the years, where every time I have talked with anyone from Lowland Rescue about how to talk to families, one of the first things that people say is, families ask questions that I'm not allowed to answer. They ask me for information that I'm not supposed to give them because it's confidential. It's been given to me by the police, and I'm not able to share it with them. And I'm really hoping that by the end of this session, you will feel really confident about what to do, because I'm going to precisely give you some tips and some guidance about what to do if you're asked questions, which you know you will be, by a family who is asking you a question that you actually are not allowed to answer truthfully, such as, where have you found them yet? And perhaps you have found them and you know that you can't tell them something, or what information have you been given by the police and you know that you're not allowed to give them that information. So I'm hoping to help you think through how to answer those questions and how to deal with the family. But I also urge you to consider, separately from here, how you look after your own well-being and mental health, given that you are often left in limbo as well, and because you play such a critical, if you like, blue light part of the service to search for someone, you're held in that ambiguous state as well. So do make sure that you are looking after yourselves and the teams that you're responsible for. So just a little bit more about ambiguous loss, and I won't read this out, but these are some of the things that in her extensive research, Pauline Boss has found, and it really rings true for me, having worked for missing people who, if you don't already know, provides support to thousands of families who are missing someone every year. And these things feel completely true to me. I think overall, the way to think of it is that the person is going through something that is a trauma. So I know some of you have worked in roles where you will have seen people experiencing trauma before. I know a lot of you come from uniformed roles, or if you know, in your role at Lowland Rescue, when you've seen somebody who's really injured, you've seen somebody certainly in a state of trauma. Ambiguous loss is a trauma. It's not a normal process, as I've said before, so it's very, very hard for the brain to process what's going on. And therefore, for all of those reasons, the family or the people who are missing someone is under quite a major state of stress. And there are three main stages, sort of the life cycle of having somebody missing, that we in our experience see families going through. And if you're looking for where you fit into this, you're either going to likely to be interacting with the family right at the beginning, in the middle of the crisis, it's just happened. That's if you're lucky enough to have been called quickly enough by the police, which I know that the police often leave it a bit too long. But even if a day or two has passed, probably the family are still in that state of crisis. And then next comes the activity. There's loads of things happening. This is when people are out there. This is when you are out there. This is when the family are, you know, all over the place, calling people, trying to work out what's happened. And very often this is the stage that Lowland Rescue are involved in. It's the bit next that happens if there isn't a result, if the person isn't found, or they are found and there's a new journey for that family to go on, which is very often the bit where you have already, or you do step away, and other agencies like Missing People, or depending on the situation, will step in. So we'll just go through what's happening for the family at each of those stages. So we've talked about already this being a trauma, and you can see there Sarah Wayland, who is an Australian academic. If you look her up, she's got loads of stuff online, Sarah Wayland. She's looked at a lot of this stuff around the stages that a family member goes through. And you can see there what the family tends to be doing. Are you trying to get my attention, Chris? Someone's banging. No. So at this stage, this is when the family is essentially expecting that any minute now their person is going to be back. That's the most common thing that we experience when we're talking to families at this very, very early stage, first few hours. If any of you have ever been in that horrible situation where you've lost sight of your child in a supermarket or on a busy beach or in a busy town centre, you'll recognise then what this family is going through at this moment. Literally, it's like holding your breath. At every moment you're expecting that person to appear around the corner, or in this case, if they've arrived at the scene of your search, they're expecting one of you literally at any moment to come and say, it's over, we've found them, it's fine. So, and again, this is part of that. This is not normal grief. So we're not in a situation that we can easily understand. We don't know what's happened. And our assumption is, well, it's going to be fine. We're going to find that person. But desperate for that news, wanting to be reassured that everything possible is being done, wanting as much activity to be happening as possible. At Missing People, we often describe it as, when someone you love goes missing, you want the whole world to stop and look. And I think if we imagine for ourselves, if it was somebody that we love, I think that's very relatable. If it was somebody I loved, I would definitely want the whole world to stop and look. So you'll notice there a lot of the thoughts and feelings that academics and that we, the charity, have found with families is that they can become quite obsessed with this idea of I have to be doing something. Nothing, everything else stops, everything else is put on hold, and effectively that it feels to them like their life is in the hands of the authorities who are investigating and searching. And from the family's perspective, Lowland Rescue is a part of that system. Because again, if we go back to what happens to people when they're in a state of trauma, they're not going to be thinking straight and able to process the difference between the voluntary sector and the statutory sector. You're a person in uniform with a Land Rover and some torches out looking for their person. You represent the authorities in which their loved one's life is in their hands. So therefore, they're going to be at this stage channeling all of this fear, anxiety, hope, frustration at you if they're with you. It might be that you are called, some of that's already happened, some of that panic, some of that sheer initial trauma is over, and perhaps a day or two has passed by the time that you are contacted to go and do a search. In any case, they're still very much focusing on the practical at this point. So, for example, we tend to find at Missing People that at this stage, a family doesn't feel that they need the support of our family support workers and our 24-hour helpline, because still on day 1, day 2, day 3, they're thinking this is going to end soon. In their minds, they're often saying there's still enough time for there to be a reasonable explanation of this, or they're starting to count, okay, you could probably have survived for 24 hours in this weather. It's only been 24 hours. This will probably end soon. They'll probably be okay. But this is where actually the reality is likely to start dawning, and things are likely to start feeling a lot more frightening, because police are going to be asking different questions, like how to gain access to their bank accounts, checking out CCTV, taking DNA from a toothbrush, doing the kind of things that will start to indicate to the family this could be a bit more serious. And you can see there that one of the things that they then start having to do is having a conversation with other people, because back at hour number 4, most of the people in their life, their colleagues, the person's friends, didn't need to know anything. If it's day 2, then if the person's employer, if they're an adult, probably needs a phone call. You know, you start to get in the realms of having to articulate this to other people, and you're trying to articulate a situation that doesn't make sense to you in the first place. So with that comes, again, more fear, but a lot more speculation about what might have happened, which then can turn into anger and frustration, because you know, people, it's normal for people to feel angry with the person, and how can you have left me in this situation where all of a sudden I'm having to have conversations I can't cope with, don't know how to have, and potentially even look at how do I tell our children where you are, those kind of things. So again, still in a state of shock, but going through something slightly new, because every hour that now ticks by is another hour where it's starting to feel possible that this won't be over very quickly. So then what happens next obviously depends on what happens next, right? So if the person isn't found, and perhaps you stop searching, and as you know, this can happen on the 6th day, the 6th week, the 6th month, depending on the search. But at some point when the practical activities tend to stop, this is when families often are in a situation where a lot of the agencies have withdrawn. And if you like, it's left to them to keep the search alive, and live with the ambiguity of this person being missing, to try and pick up pieces. So this is likely to be the point where Lowland Rescue isn't involved in this family anymore, or this person. Unfortunately, you haven't been able to find them, and that family's life needs to continue somehow. So this, as you will know, sadly for some families, goes on for months, years, or even decades, and they go on what one mother there describes as it being like a roller coaster ride of emotions. And if anyone does look up Sarah Wayland, who I referred to earlier, she's done a lot of writing about the challenge of dealing simultaneously with hope and despair. Because hope is a positive. I hope for my loved one. I hope that they are okay. I hope that they are well. I hope that I will see them again one day, or have answers about what's happened to them. Coupled with coping with the despair of, on the one hand, do I despair that I'm never going to see you again, which I don't know, because I don't know what happened, and the despair of anger and feeling left and feeling frustrated that how has this happened. And families get very emotionally tired, as you can imagine, with going backwards and forwards between the two, and round around hope and despair. And that's very often where this is the stage where often families are being supported by missing people, and have a named worker and a counsellor, and come together at various events where we can put them in touch with essentially the only people in the world who understand what they're going through. So some of you, I don't know if you're online, came to our carol service this Christmas, and you've been to other events that we hold. And really, as much as you and I, as professionals who are very well trained and go into this profession, we can't understand unless we have somebody missing, and I know some of you do. We can't understand what this is like. So for families, being with another family member who is going through this can be an incredible comfort. One of the things that families regularly talk about is that they lose access to people who are willing to have conversations with them about the missing person, because people start to expect that they will move on and that it will be like bereavement and grief, which, as you know, it isn't. So it can be a very isolating experience for somebody. And then, of course, there's... Oh, hello. No, okay. Then, of course, was that a question?
No, that seems to be Lorraine. I'm not sure what's happening there, but I've muted her. Lorraine, we'll get to your questions a little bit later.
No offense, Lorraine. Okay, so then this ongoing support stage when the person is found is of course different again, and depends on the state in which the person is found. So the person might be found alive, might be found sadly to have died. In either case, that family's going on a whole new journey with or without their found missing person. So in some cases, the person has been found and needs some additional help, as you'll know. So you're often a big part of that initial help, because you're applying that first layer of first aid, or getting the person safely to the help, whatever it is that they need, and the next conversation that they need to have, for example, with a police officer. But then beyond that, that missing person and their family, if they are alive, have got a whole new journey to go on, where they are reconnected after something really distressing for both parties. And what families are often going through in this situation is a high degree of mistrust of the person who's been missing. So where when they were missing, there was a lot of hope and despair, which are opposites and very difficult. Now they're relieved to have the person back, but also worried about whether are they okay, are they going to go missing again? Which, if you put yourself in the position of the person who's been missing, if you've returned, and your family doesn't trust you, and your family wants you to answer lots of questions that you're finding difficult to talk about, that can be quite distressing as well for the person. So I'm not going to go into this in loads of detail, because I've put together my own advice and toolkit and tips for you. But this is what the research that people like Pauline Boss and Sarah Wayland and the charity has done with families. So things that we know help are all here. So we've talked about some of them already, about getting emotional support. Being able to talk about the person really helps. Being able to acknowledge that they have hope for their person who is missing, while also learning how to cope with the anxiety and the potential that they might not be able to see them again. And the things that we know really don't help are, I mean, even that first line is a bit theoretical, getting too theoretical. Essentially, if we're talking to somebody who is missing someone, my advice to you is go with them where they're at. If they want to talk about their hope, or if they want to talk about their despair, or if they're feeling like they actually don't want to think about this anymore, whatever, go with them where they're at. Don't assume that they're at any particular stage. Everything that I've just told you is generalizing about the entire population. Definitely something that families find difficult is that society at large thinks that they're going to find some kind of closure at some point. By definition, they're not, because that person is missing. And I'll take the opportunity again to let you know that you too might not have that closure. In some ways, for the agencies who are involved at the moment of crisis, closure can be hardest, because whether the person is found or not only do you live with the ambiguity of, is that person that I went out to search for a whole week ever going to be found? Are they okay? But even if they were found, you might have found them in particularly distressing circumstances, and then not know what happens next and whether they're okay. So another reason to look after yourselves and have processes in place to make sure that you take care of one another. And then other people trying to speculate with that person, what do they think has happened, or trying to sort of quash their hope and suggest that, my theory is this and I know best what has happened. It's best to be led by the family. The family, as I've said, will often swing between hope and despair, and our job at Missing People is to hold them and look after them through that experience. So I have got some, like a guide for you, and I hope you don't mind, but I borrowed the acronym SAR because I thought it would stick in your minds. I worked on this with families, with family representatives from the charity. So I haven't just made this up off the top of my own head. I sat down with families who've lived with a missing person and who've lived
Speak
through.
to the family, don't avoid them. Actively give them a role if you can.
Oh, okay, sorry. So speak, act, refer. This I hope is really simple to remember. So this first one, and we'll go through them one by one, is about having the confidence to talk to the family. This is the bit that we were talking about at the beginning, where it feels instinctive. A lot of you have told me over the years that your instinct is to just not talk to the family because it's easier, because you know you're going to be asked questions you can't answer. I strongly advise you to do the opposite of that, even though it might feel instinctive. The reason why it probably feels instinctive is because of your own discomfort with that. So my suggestion to you is to proactively talk to the family, even if they don't come and talk to you. If you know they're there, talk to them, don't avoid them. And if they ask you a question, always be willing to answer it. Always have an answer for them that is truthful. So if you can't tell them the answer because then that's something that they're not supposed to know, let them know, be honest that that's not something you're able to discuss with them. And you know, this seems really obvious, but about being empathetic, but remember that you're dealing, if we go right back to the beginning, you're dealing with them at the stage where they're in crisis mode, or join the search mode. So they're in, my whole world has fallen apart, trauma, can't think straight, can't operate in a normal way, coupled with I have to be active, I have to know that everything possible is being done. And you will know, if you've met families at the scene of a search, that might mean that you're confronted with someone who comes across as quite angry. They might be having a go at you, they might be suggesting that you're not doing good enough, they might be in floods of tears, they might be silent, all sorts of different things that are really difficult to deal with, especially when you know you've not necessarily come into this role specifically with the skills to support somebody who is in emotional crisis. You've come into this, some of you, because you want to get out there and help someone search and be physically active and be out there doing something in your community, and you don't necessarily bring with you, nor should you, the skills to be able to deal with a person in emotional crisis. But there are simple things that you can do. So when you're feeling worried about talking to that family, what I want you to do is acknowledge that that's your discomfort. So if you are feeling really anxious because of, for any reason, because you're worried about what they're going to ask you, or you don't know how to cope with the behaviors and the emotions that you're seeing, just try and take a moment to think, this is my discomfort, it belongs to me, and I'm the professional and they are the family, and this is worse for them, their discomfort is worse, and therefore it's my responsibility to try and get over my discomfort and my anxiety, and to go to that family with and be confident and sort of take charge of the moment for them, because they can't take charge, they're in complete trauma and crisis, and perhaps guide them to a place where you can have a conversation and help lead that conversation. If you've ever talked to somebody who's in complete emotional crisis, you'll know that they're not thinking straight, they're not able to listen properly. A lot of what you're saying they won't really be hearing and processing very well. So the more that you do to sort of take charge of the situation, and I mean that with take charge with kindness, not with you know, I don't mean by kind of bossing them about, but by going, hi, you know, come and introduce yourself, my name's Karen, I'm a search technician, I can see that you're really upset, shall we have a chat, would you like to understand what's going on? It's fine to not tell them the things that you're not supposed to tell them, just be completely straight with them. If you're struggling with that, just put yourself in their position. You've been in that position before, I'm sure you've been in a situation where you've asked a professional a question that they've said, I'm not able to tell you that. And I'm sure you can recall a time when somebody has said that to you in a very dismissive way and you felt disrespected. and recall a time where someone has not answered the question you've wanted answered, but they've done it in a way where they've left you thinking, okay, well, I understand you can't tell me that, but I still feel like I'm being respected and treated like a human. So next, actively give them a role if you can. I know this one is difficult, but you can make this as simple or as complicated as you like, according to your own policies and procedures. So there might, some of these things just might not work for you because it's not the right thing for a family to be doing. But if there is anything at all that you can give that family as an activity, try to give them something to do, even if it is talking you through, again, is there anything you think I should know about where they've been, or tell me about them. It's helpful. It's really, if I put myself in the position, if I arrived somewhere where you were searching for one of my parents, and if you were saying to me that, you know, I'm sorry, I can't take you out with us to do this search on water or whatever, and I was desperately trying to do that, and you turned around to me and said, Karen, the most helpful thing you could do is search your memory for the things that have been happening recently, the places that your mum likes to go, the things that your dad likes to do. It would be so helpful. Just just run it through for me. Even if you already know that, even if you've already had that information, for a start, you might get something that you didn't get earlier. But secondly, you've made me feel useful in a situation where, you know, somebody I love's life is in your hands. So these are just some of my ideas about ways that you might like to get somebody active and involved if you're able to. If you are going to very practically involve somebody, great, brilliant. If you're not going to and they want to, explain to them honestly and clearly why you can't, why you're not going to send them out on the search, for example, if that's not something that you would do. And finally, refer. Don't try and be absolutely everything to everybody. You don't need to simultaneously be brilliant Lowland rescue searchers and counsellors. We Missing People are here, but there's other organisations as well that you'll know of, that, or talking to their GP or whatever it is that you feel that they need, but refer them on to other sources of support. The quickest and simplest thing to do is to refer them to us, because just like you, we're here 24 hours a day, and can do a lot of that hand holding through this horrendous situation. We can also help them understand your role and what you're doing. So it's very common at the early stages. The most common conversation that we have with a family is about what's happening in both the search and the investigation, and lots of questions about what do various things mean. So we get lots of questions about, why am I not being told everything? And we can help a family understand why that is, or understand why they've not been invited to actually go out on a search with you and things like that. Or so things that I've learned since working with Lowland is why you would search things in a particular order, why you wouldn't just want a member of the public driving up a pathway with their car, because then you can't be sure whether those tyre marks belong to that member of the public or somebody else. I never would have known that until I had become involved in both Missing People and Lowland Rescue. You can't expect a family member to know that either. So something that seems extremely obvious to them, like you haven't searched that particular piece of land yet, I'm here, I'm ready, I've got my car, why aren't you sending me out to look at it, is actually a really common sense question. And the kind of thing that we get all the time, you will get all the time. So again, the best thing that you can do is be honest, answer someone's questions as honestly as you can, and with as much humanity as you can. I'm going to stop there because we've covered loads about families, and see if you've got any questions. And Chris, I'll definitely need your help here.
Okay then, folks. So if you've got a question, either just write me in the group chat, or hit the raise your hand button at under participants at the bottom of the screen, and we'll give it a minute or so to see if anybody has any questions. So far, it's looking fairly quiet.
But Lorraine
Okay.
definitely had a question.
She did. Unfortunately, it was a technical question, I think.
Okay.
So Neil Balderson has a question. Over to you, Neil. I will just unmute you. There you go. Neil, all yours.
Right. Thank
Hi,
you very much. Hello, Karen. We've conversed on several emails and probably will on many more to come, I suspect.
You're the press person.
That's me.
Great. Hi.
Hello. I have a question which kind of relates to this. Are you aware of our statistics and statistical studies? Because that might be something that's probably very useful. And if not, is it possible that missing persons can feed back into our statistics database to increase them? And he's kind of looking towards Chris for that question as well.
Yeah. Are you talking about the studies that inform your search tech, your how far is somebody likely to have gone if they've got dementia and that kind of thing?
Yeah. So in the rescue phase, the statistics are generally pretty good because we're looking in 24, 48 hours, etc.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking long term when we go, we call it the rest of the world scenario.
Yeah.
It's interesting to know when these long term missing people are found, where they're found and what the history and what that's been, because maybe that could inform the statistical studies.
Sure. Well, yes, I am, and we are aware of that, and that's precisely the kind of thing that, from a family support point of view, we need our family support workers to know, because, you know, if they're saying things like, "This is crazy, why are they searching such a small area when he or she could have gone anywhere?" For example. That's the kind of thing that we need to know to be able to say to a family, you know, this is actually, it hasn't been plucked out of the air. It's quite an exact science. You know, it's actually that search area is in the best interests of your missing person because it's designed to try and find them quickly. In terms of us feeding into those statistics, we work very closely with the UK Missing Persons Bureau of the National Crime Agency, who gather up all of the police data. If your question is about how could our information inform that data, if it's in relation to where somebody's found and how far away they are from home and in what circumstances, then it wouldn't be of any better quality than what the police already have and already submit, which then in turn informs your, I've forgotten what it's called, the handbook of
Kester.
Yeah.
We've got a variety of
Yeah.
stats books available,
Okay.
to us, including iFind and Kester.
Yeah. Okay. So iFind has come straight out of NCA, the Grampian stuff. So the technical stuff on where somebody is, our quality would be no better than the police's because it's the same, if you like. So if we speak to the person when they're found after a year, the police are going to have the exact same information about where they were and in what circumstances. Okay. Does that answer your question?
It does, and it kind of leads me on to a second question, because I'm always greedy on these things.
All right.
Yeah, I can see Chris rolling his eyes. So the second one, probably what would be useful is if working together, we prepare a briefing pack that explains frequently asked questions of why aren't you looking there? We haven't put a dog team in, we need to lose a scent. Why can't you do this? Because then I know you've got significantly greater exposure than us. I'm sure we can work that out together. Yeah,
I'd be really happy to do that with you. I think well, one of the things that I did when I first delivered a session like this years ago now, with together with a family member, Alexandra Hicks. If anyone was there, you might remember Alexandra is the sister of Kevin Hicks, who was missing. We asked you, lots of your members beforehand, to submit what are the questions that you get asked. And so, yeah, feel free to submit more to me and we can come up with a bit of an aid memoir for you. I think you would need to populate that with the factual technical answers. So it's not for me to say why are you only searching an area this size as opposed to that one. But what we might be able to help you do is why isn't there a helicopter in the sky and a boat in the lake, and essentially why haven't you got the entire army of resources out to find my person. How do you phrase the answer to a question like that to be both honest and sensitive to the situation? Would that help?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, well, I'll ask you guys to work together on how you gather up those questions, and then very happy to work with you or Chris or whoever to put that together.
Fine. I think we've started the ball rolling for questions now.
I think we may have done, and it's not lost on me that Neil was trying to get me to answer questions as well. I'll deal with you later. We've got 3 other questions, and then we'll let Karen move on with the presentation. So the first one's from Richard. Should a search technician be talking to the family? Is it not down to the team leader to refer them to the search manager or pulser?
I think that it's for you to decide who the best person in your team is to be dedicated to that family. If you think that there are particular roles who should be deliberately kept away from and separate from the family, then in some ways great, because what you've done is you've nominated a role or a particular set of people who are at the search to specifically be the ones who the family talk to. So actually that could be really helpful, because if I'm that person on the search and there's all this activity going on around, I can act as that family's single point of contact. So that could be great. And if you think that that shouldn't be a search technician and it should be a team leader in your local team, great. That sounds like a good decision. I'm not familiar enough with the finer details of what all the different roles mean to be able to advise you on that. However, you might be one of the people, if you like, who's not tasked with talking to the person's family, and yet you're confronted with them anyway. And so this advice is just as useful, I would suggest. You've said is it really for a search technician to talk to a family? Maybe you're right that that's not the person who proactively goes and talks to the family. But if you're a search technician and somebody's dad comes up to you or somebody's wife comes up to you at a search because you've just got back off of a particular search, you've come back to the van for a cup of tea to debrief on what's just happened and make your next decisions, and you are approached by that person, I would suggest that you can still use this guide to at least do things like, instead of walk away, which a lot of people have said to me they feel like is the right thing to do, just literally walk away if the family is there. It's too difficult. I shouldn't be having this conversation. I would say try and overcome your own anxiety about that. Be confident. Say to that family, we're really glad you're here. You're welcome here. I'm going to find the right person to talk to you, because my role is to be out looking for this person, or the thing that I really need to do for your dad, for your husband right now is go and write down what I've just done or whatever. So I'm going to direct you to Chris. Chris is the team leader. Chris will talk to you. So at least have the confidence to say something rather than nothing, and get that person talking to whoever you think is the best person for them to be talking to.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to do 2 more and then we are going to move along. There are more questions than that, but I'm conscious of the fact that we've kind of got to move on, and you've got the rest of the presentation to do. So we'll see how we'll offer question time at the next window. And if need be, we can always email you the questions as well.
Okay.
What do we got next? We have Steve Hill. So, hi Karen, what's your view on how best Lowland Rescue can work with families who organise public searches?
Wow. Well, families organising public searches happens all the time. It's completely normal, and it's probably what we would all do if the person that we love is missing. I think my best advice to you is to try and give that family the best advice and guidance that you can, and get them involved if you can. So, for example, if you said to a family, if you sat me down and it was somebody in my family and said, it's really important that we focus on these areas, the most helpful thing that you could be doing is flyering the city centre, or phoning everybody in their phone book, or if you're going to be going out doing looking for them yourself, focus on the things that you feel are safest for them to focus on. I appreciate that that has insurance implications, and Lowland Rescue is not unique in that sense. So the police have this concern as well, that as soon as you instruct a family to do something, you might be liable for their health and safety under your insurance. I think that's the kind of thing you need to be honest with a family about, that the reason why you use highly trained specialist searchers is because this is highly specialist work, and your insurance covers you only for those people. So the more honest you are with that family, if you're not going to actually task them with anything, and then be honest with them about why you're not going to do that. I think go through the same thing. Talk to the family, tell them what you're doing, reassure them that you're doing everything possible in your power to try and find them. So that's the speak bit. The act bit is, if you can give them a role, great. If you can't, let them know why you can't, and let them know that, you know, while I, Lowland Rescue, am out doing my highly specialist search for your person, there's other places for you to go and get support. So yeah, I would say be proactive, talk to them, reassure them, and if you can involve them. It's for you to think through from your own insurance and policy point of view whether it is or isn't safe for you to task them. And Chris, have we had this conversation before? I'm guessing your policy is fairly similar to the police on that.
Yes, it is. I mean, I think what some of the feedback we've got coming in on the chat is really, regardless of what we do, whether it's a good idea to be for family members to be talking to members of search teams, they're going to do it. They're going to do it if they want to do it. So having a known process in place is always better than being caught off guard.
Yeah.
And some form of practice about what to say, what not to say.
Yeah.
And it really just comes down to being prepared. Whatever you're going to do, prepare for it in advance. Don't get caught out.
Yes, agreed. And especially, I think this is where I know I've said it lots, but I think this is where just being really honest and straight with people counts. Can you imagine how devastated you would be if you realized that you know, the fact that you've driven your car up that lane now means I can't really verify whether I should send people there or not, because I don't know whether their car, you know, like, I'm finding this hard to explain. You all know what I mean, I hope. I'd be devastated to realize that what I did in good faith, thinking that I was helping the search for my own father, for example, actually turned out to hinder the process. So I think if you start from a position of confidently treat people as adults, and go and say, I get it, I know you want to do your own searching, these are the things I need you to know, and this is why, as much as it seems intuitive to go out there and do this, some of that could get in the way. This is something that it's really difficult, because this is something that we encounter, you encounter, and the police encounter, and there isn't a very straightforward answer, because it all comes back to that debate over, well, if you've got 100 members of the community willing to help a search, why on earth wouldn't we use them, and isn't it morally wrong not to use them, versus it's not necessarily in the best interests of the search for that to happen. It's another thing that I wish we could, and perhaps we can, work together to bottom out and actually have a bit of a process in place nationally that means that instead of being in that situation and all kind of pointing to each other and not really sure what to say to people, that we actually have a system that we can follow. For now, because there isn't a system that very clearly can be followed, the best advice I can give to you is talk to that family. If professionally speaking, make friends with them, let them know we're your allies, we're out doing this kind of search for your person. Pleasure to meet you. I'm the team leader, I'm the search manager, whatever your role is. Great that you're out here doing your own thing. Here's a few things I need you to know about what we're doing and why we're doing it this way. Better to have a relationship with that family than to find yourself in a situation where the community thinks that they have to work against you rather than with you.
Okay, thank you very much. And the last question for this round, we're going to go to Phil in Hansard. So Phil, I'm going to take you off mute. So you are now off mute. Go ahead.
Oh, hi, Karen. Just a quick question. Are you aware of the Herbert Protocol? And if so, does missing people actively publicise it?
Yes, we are aware of it. Yes, we encourage people through our helpline and our family support work to use it. We definitely aren't as active in kind of publicly through social media and things like that. We're not as active as I've seen all of you being. I've seen lots of stuff on social media that you're all doing about the Herbert Protocol, which makes complete sense because everything that's in that and in the documents that people create are obviously then informing your search. So I think it's great that you guys are promoting it. Yes, we're aware of it. We're encouraging families when we speak to them. The thing to remember with missing people is we're often involved after the fact, right? So the families we're supporting, the person is missing and they're still missing. And we don't necessarily become aware of that family and they don't become aware of us until after the fact it is that they've gone missing. So sometimes it's too little too late, because if the person's still missing, then the Herbert Protocol is not necessarily going to help unless they come back and go missing again. But yeah, we're aware of it. We've been involved in it from the beginning with partners, thinking through how we talk to families and advise them. If you've followed what we're doing in the Search Dog Heroes project, Lowland Rescue and Missing People Together will be similarly. The project is about educating anyone who is caring for somebody with a missing person about the information that they need available and the ways to be prepared if their person should go missing. So it's got a similar function to it.
Lovely, thanks very much.
Thanks.
Okay, then we'll leave that now. There was one other question, but we'll leave that towards the end. Otherwise, we'll never get started on the next part of the presentation. So, Karen, back to you.
Okay, thanks everyone. I think we will have time later because the next section probably isn't quite so long. So what I've done is I have focused on that which I know is most common for local teams, the people who you're most commonly going to be searching for and going to find. So adults, of course, and mental health crisis, i.e. people who are suicidal, despondent, depressed, being the people who you're most regularly finding. Now, I know that you're often searching for people with dementia. I have focused more on those people who are in mental health crisis, but I think that the principles are true regardless of the person that you find. I think most of it is relatable across any person that you might come across. So here's what we know about what an adult tends to be going through. And there's just a couple of slides here that really taken from Geographies of Missing People. So again, the person who asked, was it Neil, about what information are we aware of that informs data? You know, you'll know that the Geographies of Missing People is a part of some of the stories that have informed some of that data around the behaviour of missing adults. I always think that first one there about adults making a series of small decisions rather than one large one is perhaps the most fascinating. And when we've worked with adults who've gone missing in mental health crisis, or extreme stress, or being unable to cope and fleeing from home after an argument and that kind of thing, that rings most true to us, that adults, the question, I like to refer to it as the pub question. When I tell people what I do, and I'm sure when you tell people about your volunteer roles, the pub question I always get asked is, so why do people go missing? And do they just, do people just decide one day to leave and pack up their stuff and go? And essentially the answer is no, they don't. They make a series of small decisions that often starts with one moment of, I can't face going home, or I have to get out of here. And it's the small decisions that come next that can leave them further and further away from home. I've put the link in for you in case you're interested. The Geography of Missing People work is truly fascinating. All of the stories are transcribed online, and there's audio things on their website where you can hear the stories of the people who've been missing. So often preceded by either a traumatic event that's happened very recently, losing a job, finding out that you're in loads of debt, relationship breakdown, mental health crisis, or something that's reminding the person of historic trauma, something that's still affecting them now. Lots and lots of adults not feeling unable to cope, whether that's with the situation they're in or the way that they are feeling with the condition that they're living with, and that causing feelings of being trapped and powerless, all of which leading to confusion, despair and fear. And there's one of the quotes there about a woman who just said she just needed some space by herself. The world's closing in, I can't cope, I need to get away. What Geographies also found was when somebody had the lucidity, if you like, to be able to think in this way, they would actively avoid authority. So essentially anyone who's formally looking for them, including their own family and friends, and said that they would take more risks. So in that context, it was about saying I'll prioritize staying hidden over staying safe. So if that means that I need to sleep somewhere where I might get mugged or hurt, I'll sleep there because I'm less likely to be found there. At the same time, being resourceful enough to feed and shelter myself, depending on my state of mind. Rarely asking for help. This is not unique to adults. Less than 10% of people ask for help when they're missing, regardless of their age. And this low identification with missing person services is relevant to you if you find someone, in that a lot of people will not consider themselves a missing person. Rather, they will consider themselves to be hiding from someone, getting away from a situation, or unable to cope with a situation. Missing is just a risk definition that we, the professionals, place on a situation to define what's going on and which agency needs to be involved. It's kind of a redundant word in every other sense. It's just describing the fact that we or someone doesn't know where that person is. And I think that's really worth remembering when we encounter somebody who has been missing, that actually what you're really dealing with is a human in some kind of crisis or problem or state where they need some help. And try, if we can, to just forget that language. Missing is just a label that we apply because it helps us understand as professionals what we're dealing with. And a lot of people will miss their own loved ones and their friends, and want to reach out to them and want to talk to them, and then go through lots of feelings of guilt that they've not been in touch with that person, and worry about, what's my mum going through, what's my partner going through, has my partner told my kids yet that I didn't come home last night? Excuse me. And that can keep people hidden for longer, and that can feed into that series of small decisions that people make, because as that time passes and the worry and the thinking about those loved ones and friends goes on, it can mount up and feel impossible to walk back through your own front door and face all of that stuff. And you can see there one man saying, none of it was premeditated, I just had to keep moving. So all of this is very relevant, of course, if you find yourself in the situation where you're then the next person to see them, and if you like, it's all over because they're not hidden anymore. So if you're finding somebody in a state where, as we've discussed, they are escaping some kind of trauma, everything is mounting up, they don't feel able to talk to people at home, they're trying to stay hidden, there's a possibility that you finding them is essentially the worst thing that's happened that day, because they don't want to be found in some cases. So you might be confronted with somebody who doesn't want to be found by you, wanted to remain hidden, or the opposite. That becomes a moment where they realize that they do need help, and they are relieved in some way to see you. And of course that depends on the circumstances, you know, 1,000 different things. And I'm sure that you've all found people in a variety of different states and with a variety of different reactions to you. But something that you can do is hold in your mind the really particular worries and experiences that person is having. And so again, like before, what I've done is kept the same acronyms: speak, act, refer. Same principles, just very slightly different things to be looking out for. So if we go through them again, being willing to answer somebody's questions, so talking to the person, and explaining who you are. I've put in there about being honest and answering their questions, like if they're asking what's going to happen, you know, do I have to see the police? Be honest with them, take the opportunity to reassure them about that. We do that all the time. We speak to people who are missing, who contact us on our helpline, and their number one fear is, am I in trouble with the police? Am I in trouble at home? What's going to happen? Am I going to be arrested? Am I going to be sectioned? And you might not know the answer to those questions. You certainly don't know what's through their own front door. Maybe they'll be arrested. They might be missing because they're wanted for something. They might be sectioned. There's all sorts of things that we don't know, but we can at least be honest about things like, you know, we are concerned about you. We want you to be okay. The police are concerned about you. They want you to be okay. If you know that the police are there right now and you're about to go and take them and introduce them to the police, you could say to them, let's go together. They're here. Or I've met this person. This is their name. We can go and talk to them together. I've put in the second paragraph there, essentially just assume that everything feels scary and strange and that they're completely ignorant of everything going around them. Assume that they think that you're the authorities. Again, if we go back to families and what we've talked about with the missing person, if they're in a state of crisis and trauma, they're not going to be able to process information in the same way. The difference between the voluntary sector and the statutory sector is irrelevant. You're somebody in a uniform, a complete stranger. There's a few of you, maybe there's a dog. This is a very unusual situation. So just assume that they're completely and utterly overwhelmed by the whole situation and don't understand what's going on, and try to be confident about explaining to them what's going on. Who am I? This is my role. This is what's happening. And then trying to be empathetic, trying to look beyond the behaviours, exactly the same as before with the family. You don't know who you're going to be dealing with. You don't know the state you're going to find them in and how pleased or not they're going to be with the fact that you've found them. So actively listen. And I think without judgment is really the key bit here. So again, you're not there to be somebody's counsellor. And I'm not suggesting that you try and be their counsellor, but you can still listen with humanity and you can still listen without judging anybody. I've put in here about avoid asking unnecessary questions. I would suggest really strongly that unless it's a necessary question about them, don't ask it, because they're going to be asked loads of questions by the police and by their family. And actually what a lot of people who've been missing, children and adults, say is that they get really tired of telling the same story over and over again and being asked the same questions over and over again. So if it's a question that you need to know the answer to, so if it's got anything to do with first aid or in anything that is a question that you need an answer to, ask it. If it's not a necessary question, and so I don't mean things like how are you okay, but I mean asking things like, so what happened then, so why did you leave then, anything like that. unless you need to know the answer to that question, I would suggest you don't ask it, and instead you focus your listening and your talking on, you know, I'm here to help. Are you okay? Let's get you to safety. This is my role. I'm sure this all seems a bit weird to you. This is what's going on. And if they start opening up to you, let them talk. You listen, follow the story wherever they want to take it. And my suggestion is try, as curious as you might be about what they're telling you, try not to turn it into an interview, because they're about to have an interview. So we don't want to tie them out before they have that proper interview. And I thought I'd just mention here that, you know, for a start, you may have spent some time comforting their devastated family yesterday or a few hours ago. You might have heard all sorts of things about what they've apparently done or not done, that, you know, or have a real degree of empathy for that family, or whatever it is. You yourself might be feeling, like I said right at the beginning, some of the things that family are feeling, a bit frustrated and a bit, you know, we've been out, we're tired, people have missed time at work to be looking for you, and maybe now you're being really rude to us or something. And I think if you're struggling to not to judge them, if you're struggling with their character or something about their story, and you just don't know how to deal with it, then I would urge you, if you're in conversation with them, instead of getting into the detail of the thing that's bothering you, maybe focus on something like what I've put here, something that kind of brings it back to, you know, my role is to get you safe. I'm not here to judge, mate. You know, any of that kind of stuff that keeps it in a safe place where you can get your bit of the work done, get your job done. They're found, they're safe, first aid is applied, they're back to a safe point, whatever your process is for when you find somebody. Follow that process. And then same again, referral, onward referral. Almost half of all people who go missing will go missing again, and it's higher in adults. So if you encounter somebody, if they're in a state to take the information, which they might not be, give it to them. If you've got our cards, give it to them. If you haven't, let me know and we'll send you some so that you can give them the cards. It's exactly the same as for families. It's 24 hours a day, call, text, email. And again, if that person needs a bit of help or holding or carrying in what comes next, either in their reconnection with their family, or if they feel like running away again or they need to run away again, we will be there to help them. So questions, happy to take questions on absolutely anything. We're at the end of my slides now, so
okay, so while Karen has a breather, just a reminder to everybody, you can go to the participants button at the bottom, click on that and then click raise hand, or you can simply type your question or just put I have a question into the chat window. But the first place we're going to go is to Nick Murphy, who had a question from the earlier session. So Nick, I hope he's prepared and not off making something.
Wake up, Nick.
Nick, I'm going to unmute you and go to you for your question.
Yes, I was. We do trauma risk management for our own team if they've been traumatised, and it begs the question: is there scope for training to cover both that and support for the missing person?
Training for how to support your teams emotionally.
They seem to go side by side. I just thought there may be some scope there for training for both of those.
Yeah, I think if we're going to do something like that, I need a bit of time to just pull together. I can certainly share with you the debriefing process that we follow both on the helpline and in our return home interview services. But I mean, the bare bones of it really is that it's any time that somebody has come on shift to do anything where they've encountered what you guys are encountering every time you're on shift, we just take the time before that person goes home to just sit down, and essentially it's a process of going, how are you okay, let's talk about what just happened, because whether something happened or not, just getting it off of our chests and just saying out loud you know, these seem like really worrying circumstances, or, you know, whatever is helpful, so that we don't take it home with us.
Yes, thank you. Some guidelines on that would be useful, because we've got our own trim practitioners, so I'm sure anything like that would be useful to them. Yeah,
sure, we can set that up.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and thanks, Nick. I'll pop you back on mute again. So, anybody else got any questions? A few people are asking if we can have a copy of the PowerPoint, so that we can send that out in support of the video that we've also taken to send out to obviously those who couldn't be here. And it was very popular. We probably could have got another 20 people on this if we tried, but we don't want the tech creaking too much. So. Has anybody else got any questions? Either raise your hand or just type something in the chat window so that I know you're trying to ask. Okay, we do have a question there. So Dan Watts. So Dan, let's have a look. Where are you, Dan? I'm gonna unmute you so you can ask your question.
Hello there. If a person's gone missing and they contact you as the charity, does the charity treat that information as confidential, or do you have to make a referral to the relevant agency?
Hi Dan. So the helpline is anonymous, so it's confidential, and people can choose therefore whether they tell us who they are, where they are, and what situation they're in. So it is only if they choose to tell us something, or they happen to tell us something identifiable, that we might be in a situation where we have to share something. So what commonly happens is people text or call mainly. Less people email now, but they can still. And we don't know who we're talking to, and so we're having a conversation with a complete stranger. We don't know where they are, who they are, and what happens is the conversation, they'll start to talk to us about the situation that they're in. So they might tell us really worrying things about the crisis that they're in, or why they need to run away, or they feel like hurting themselves, or whatever situation that they're in. They'll tell us that in an anonymous way, and if we become concerned about what we're hearing, we'll tell them that we're concerned about what we're hearing, and that we'd like to get some help. And very often what will happen is the conversation will get to a point, because the team are trained to getting it to that point, where they are willing to and happy to share who they are or where they are, and we very, very rarely breach confidentiality. We normally share information with a third party with the person's full consent, which, as you know, I know a lot of you work or have worked as paramedics and police officers. You'll know that it's far better to go and get somebody who consents to you turning up than who doesn't. So we work very hard to try and work with someone's consent, to let them know that we're concerned, and you've told me that you're in Reading Town Centre, and I've got an idea of where you might be, and I really need to get you some help. If the person won't consent to it, then we will breach their confidentiality if we have to, if we can't get their consent. But at the outset of the conversation, it's completely anonymous. So what you can reassure people of is that if they are feeling too scared to talk to their family, or too scared to talk to the police or social worker or whoever it is, they're too frightened to tell somebody what's going on, but they clearly need some advice and help, then the helpline is a great way of them getting that advice. And what we know and what we train our teams to do is to listen to what that person's going through, help them think it through, and get to a point where they're willing to get some help if that's what they need.
Okay, thanks very much. Do the police ever contact you if they know you're working with somebody?
Yeah, sometimes. That tends to be in quite extreme circumstances. So if somebody is found in very suspicious circumstances, and ours is the last number that they've called, or if they know, for whatever reason, they know that we've talked to somebody and that person is suspected of a very serious crime or whatever, the police will sometimes contact us and formally request information, which, you know, goes through a bit of a process for us to get them that information. It's quite rare for that to happen. But yeah, sometimes the police will contact us. Police, nationally, police refer, just like with Lowland Rescue, all the police forces that you're working with, in the same way as they will have teams of people who know how to call upon Lowland Rescue and refer into Lowland Rescue, so too do they refer to us. So they'll ask us to help with publicity, or refer the family for help, or ask us to send a text safe, which is a text message to the person's phone offering them the helpline. So often the police are coming to us like they do with Lowland Rescue to say, can you help? But yes, sometimes they will come and say, we need some information because something very serious has happened, or we know that this is a murder or whatever, and we need some information.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dan. And next question comes from Neil Balderson again. There you go, Neil. You're unmuted.
Yeah, it's related to sort of de-escalation processes. So obviously, you can potentially have someone call you on the phone and they're in a serious crisis.
Yeah.
We come across somebody in the field, and we have where they're sat on the edge of a bridge, or and there are some cases we've been told, for example, children with autism, if they're about to enter the water, you can grab them, but they're going to go off the deep end and they're going to go screaming. So do you have any tips or training for de-escalation?
Well, a lot of, broadly speaking, I'm not referring to any particular group of people here, because I think if we're talking as specifically as what does a person with autism need versus what does a person with dementia need, we probably need to go and get some more specialist information. But broadly speaking, de-escalation is about doing what we can to either mirror the person, or try and use our tone of voice, the volume of our voice, the speed at which we talk. So like I'm doing now, I could start to slow down my speaking and start to just change the tone slightly, or I can speed up, or I can be faster and more like this, which according to the situation. So we can guide people, we can de-escalate people by starting to mirror their body language at the same time as using our tone and speed of voice to try and just bring the situation down from up here to down there. There are situations, of course, where we have to physically intervene because somebody is either about to hurt us or hurt the person that we're working with, or jump off the bridge, where we might physically need to protect ourselves or protect them. But all the while that we don't need to be doing that, the de-escalation techniques that we teach our staff are about trying to keep the situation open and calm. So I might be stood on the edge of the bridge, but all the while I'm stood there looking at you in the eye and having a conversation with you, the more that you can do to keep me talking, I'm stood on the bridge, aren't I? I'm not jumping off of it at that point. If I'm about to jump off of it, grabbing me, taking control of the situation might be exactly the right thing to do. Whereas if you've got my attention and we're talking and you've got my eye contact, or I'm listening to you clearly, then you can probably slow things down, and allow the conversation to take a little bit longer than it might seem counterintuitive. The gut thing might be, we've got to get you off of here right now. But if that is going to risk me making the jump because I'm scared or I don't feel like I can trust you, then it's probably better to gain my trust first. So also things like, again, reassurance, explaining to somebody who you are, trying to open up essentially any topic of conversation that you can. Things like, if I'm saying to you, the reason why I need to do this, to hurt myself, whatever, is because nobody cares about me, nobody loves me, whatever, instead of like resisting the urge to say, I'm sure that's not true, I'm sure there's people that love you, which could potentially get into an argument, because if my view of the world is nobody cares about me, there's probably nothing you can do to convince me that I'm wrong. Rather open up the conversation. Tell me a bit about what's happening. I'm really sorry to hear that. I'm sorry to hear you feel that way. What's going on? What's left you feeling this way? Because all the while we're having a conversation, even if it sounds ludicrous, even if my answer to your question is, nobody cares for me because my parents wouldn't buy me a new pair of trainers, regardless of how ludicrous or untrue or unreal it sounds. All the while we're having a conversation, I'm not hurting myself and I'm not hurting you, and I'm much more likely to build a rapport with you that puts you in a position where you can go, you know, let's go and talk somewhere a bit more comfortable, or let's get away from here because I don't want you to fall in, or something like that. I don't know whether you guys have ever done any sort of mental health first aid or suicide prevention stuff. I'm sure some of you have. So I'm kind of deliberately not saying too much about that, because I don't know whether you encourage your teams to try and assess suicide risk and literally de-escalate suicide risk. Is that something that you do or want to be able to do?
It's one of the ones that we're looking at, and we're one of the relatively new teams, so we're sort of learning all the various things and ticking the boxes. But from talking with other teams, I know that they've got them in place, and they talk very, very highly of it.
Yeah, for the suicide stuff, this like mental health first aid and suicide.
Yeah,
yeah.
mental health first aid. I'm also secretly trying to convince work to pay for me to do it, but that's another story.
Yeah. I think it makes a lot of sense to me if it's something that you can do, and it's something that you're able to, you know, either get for free or fundraise for, to be able to pay for to get that training, because it's very intense training. So it might be that I don't know whether it's something nationally we need to look at as a train the trainer thing, or it's something that you go and source locally. But yes, mental health first aid in a situation like that, where somebody is right now wanting to hurt themselves or kill themselves, there's some really simple and very effective things that you can learn and apply around understanding what that person's going through and trying to avoid them hurting themselves. But really, the basic principle is keep the conversation open. Try and build rapport with that person and keep the conversation open. If my view of the world is that everything is awful, or nobody loves me, or I'm not worth living, I'm not worthy of anything, trying to just follow what I'm saying rather than disagree with what I'm saying. So rather than trying to convince me that my life is worth living, try to understand why I don't feel like my life is worth living. Because the longer that conversation goes on for, the more chance there is that I build enough rapport with you to leave that situation, or you're literally keeping the fire back while you wait for the fire brigade. You're basically just keeping me alive until somebody who's highly trained, a negotiator, arrives, takes over from you, and you've done the best thing you possibly could, which is not frighten me in the meantime, and then I'm more likely to make my way off the bridge. Okay, that's kind of the simple answer.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, I think we have reached the end of the questions, Karen. So do you have anything else that you wanted to add, or are you completely done now?
No, the only thing I wanted to say is if I've said anything that people think, it might not be a question, but if I've said anything where you think that doesn't sound right, it doesn't ring true, doesn't feel like something we could apply, then either speak up now, I'd love to hear it, or let me or Chris know, because I can do this again, we can do this again, and in different ways, and I want it to be fit for purpose for Lowland Rescue. So if it's not, I really want to know, because it needs to be useful to you in the field.
Brilliant. Well, so let me finish off by saying thank you very much for the time you spent with us this evening. Fascinating as always, and very well delivered, as it always is. This is probably the biggest webinar we've run now, with the most people. And I know, because people have been texting me, there's in some locations we've got several people looking at the same screen, and I'm seeing feet and glasses of wine photos being posted to me as people are getting together to, oh yeah, no, there was me as well, as people are all getting together to watch this. So the real story is we've got 52 online, but I suspect we've got 60 plus actually watching it. And we had several people who had some technical problems as well and couldn't get on, who are eagerly awaiting the video, which should be out tomorrow. And the slide deck as well, so we'll send that out to them. A lot of people saying thank you on the chat as well. So Karen, once again, thank you very much for everybody on the call and from everybody at Lowland Rescue, and we look forward to the next one.
Yes, me too. Thanks, guys. It's weird that I can't see you, but enjoy your wine. I'm going to go and have one myself now, and I'll see you all soon.
You're much better off not being able to see them. I can see them.
Okay, thank you.
Take care, everybody. Thank you all very much for joining.
Bye.
Cheers all.